of yourself, because your structure, the Judicial Conduct Tribunal that must report to you, is still considering the matter. I think, like everybody else, you ought to be considered to be innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, Chief Justice, I'll ask you to just bear with me. I have 3 questions. One is about the 600 million that you refused. Exactly what is the amount that you want for the court modernization process? Secondly, when your term ends, you will excuse my ignorance in this one and you'll educate me about that. When your term ends, are you going to vouch for a female Chief Justice to take your place? And it's quite wonderful to see the people that flank you now. Are you going to vouch for a woman, Chief Justice to take your place, or are you going to leave it to the people who have to decide this? And I'm not sure who has to decide this. So you'll educate me on that one. Thirdly is on the heads of courts meeting tomorrow. What is the most important issue that's going to be discussed there? Just the one issue that's the most important issue. I know I've engaged with Mr. Ngobe, who was quite cagey on this one, and said it's in the report, but, that's his job. He was just doing his job very well. But on your part, as Chief Justice, what is going to be the most important issue at that meeting tomorrow? Because it's a closed meeting, as I understand it.
Well, we'll have a briefing after the meeting as to what happened. From where I sit, every issue is important. I can't think of any issue that stands out, but my colleagues are here to remind me if I'm mistaken in believing that there isn't necessarily an issue that stands out above all others. I mean, we have important issues like the judicial wellness program that I alluded to earlier. So everything is important to us, but importance may be relative. Now, I'll deal with the end of my term and ask Judge President Mlambo to deal with the figures in relation to funding, because the situation has changed, and when you don't have enough money, you don't even know how to work out budgets for the future, but he bears the responsibility for that project. Here is what I have to say. It is not open to me to vouch for anybody. In fact, if I vouch for anybody, you're going to have a situation where all sorts of suspicions arise. I prefer to leave it to the one who bears the constitutional responsibility to identify my successor to do so, and that is the president. I would never want to find myself in a situation where I look like I have an agenda to push. I have my preferred people. No. We are all well known. Let the president decide who he believes is the right person to nominate for that position. And it's up to him to identify any of them. So I'm not going to vouch for anybody. JP?
Thank you, CJ. I think I'm not going to give you figures about how much we need. All I can tell you is we have adopted a phased approach of digitizing our processes. The CJ mentioned during his address that there was a project that ran in Gauteng. That project was very successful. As a result, we're going to run about 70% of our cases on a digital platform starting 2 weeks' time from now in Gauteng. But we're then going to follow up with another pilot in KZN, because there are a number of things that you need to have in place before you have a digital platform, like the infrastructure, the Wi-Fi strength, and things like that. So we have the budgets to adopt a phased approach throughout the South African court system.
Okay, my name is Judicial Mogoeng on behalf of Gateway News. Greetings to Chief Justice and the President, Judge President, sorry. There are 2 things I would like a bit of clarity, Chief Justice. You mentioned we need sort of a we need to reconsider how rules are set and referenced, 1965. Yeah, so if you could just elaborate on that. Another thing is this wellness program. What is the state, if you can just share, of trauma and that judicial officers are faced with, and if you can just give us a state of the impact of the wellness of our leaders.
Thank you very much. You see, at the moment, in terms of legislation, the Rules Board, which is chaired by a judge, President Maya, I think, used to be chair. Am I mistaken? It's Majid, I think, who was, and then Justice Dambusa, and Justice Kolapen as well. It's almost, in fact, it's always chaired by a judge. They craft rules. Accommodating whatever it is needs to be changed in the way we run our processes as the courts. Thereafter, they must make a recommendation to the minister. And the minister tends to take his time before the rules are finalized. What happened was, in the course of refining the Superior Court's bill before it became an act, we made representations as the judiciary that the authority to make rules be vested in the judiciary, because that's our space. We understand what is required at any given time and how to go about it, and other jurisdictions have moved in that direction. To our shock, when the act came, it even took away the rule-making authority of the Constitutional Court, which was there already. I had to step in and go and have a meeting with the president and say, listen, stop this thing. And I crafted a rule, the Gazette, in terms of which the Superior Courts Act was to be implemented in such a way as to exclude the operationalization of that section that was going to take away the authority of the Constitutional Court to make its own rules, because we've seen the benefit. So all we are asking is, allow us, because you are even relying on us to craft these rules, to craft our own rules. It's not a power thing, it's an efficiency and effectiveness thing. So that's what we were alluding to. The labor courts, for instance, the labor court, the labor appeal, they make their own rules. Why can't we make our own rules? Why can't the high courts make their own rules? That's where we are. Two, when the Oscar Pistorius case was running, Judge Masipa was attacked left, right, and center. Now reflect on the need for this judicial wellness program. She was attacked left, right, and center. I remember being shown a tweet, because I'm not on the social media platforms, from now President Donald Trump, saying she's a moron. All sorts of insults, all the way from America. Now imagine you are a judge, you are in that space, you have a family. When you go to the mall, when you go wherever, people are watching you, they know the kind of attacks that have been leveled against you from all sorts of platforms. It gets to you. And something needs to be done, because it is the operational space that the institution has caused you to occupy that have brought about that damage to your well-being. People do rape cases. You have no idea what some of these cases look like, what the pictures look like. And then you are there. You can see the trauma of this child, the trauma of this woman. You are a human being. It gets to you. It's not enough now to try and be strong. When you are alone and it's time for reflection, this thing's damaging effect manifests. Murder cases as well, and threats on the lives of people. And The kind of attacks now, imagine you are one of these judges who people are just gratuitously floating their names around saying that they are corrupt, they have received this, they have received that. You have children. When you're passing through the mall or you are going to a place of worship, people are scratching each other and laughing. Even if it may not be about you, you are bound to think, oh yeah, they are saying, there goes the corrupt one. You are coming out of that government vehicle. They will say, this vehicle must have been bought by that funding that they say this person received. That's traumatic. And it would be irresponsible of us as the judiciary not to take the initiative to make sure that there's a credible program in place that allows our people to very privately and confidentially go to and receive proper attention. In our engagement with one of the clinical psychologists, he said, you know, not everybody in our profession is as ethical as we might think he or she is. Not even in the medical profession. They tell. So it's necessary that those that are going to be running this judicial wellness program are social workers who are seasoned and who are known even by their colleagues to be committed to confidentiality and to be competent. The same applies to clinical psychologists. The same applies to every other player who would be involved there. The last, I can't make out my handwriting on the last one. What was it now? Have I answered everything? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. You are also the head of the JSC, and the JSC is meeting or sitting next week. While the JSC, conducts its activities in the glare of the media and the public, but its deliberations have always been shrouded in secrecy. In the interest of transparency that you are championing, don't you think it's about time that the JSC opens up its deliberations to the public, or at least make its record of decision open to the public, so that the South African public can know who of those people voted for whichever candidate was vying for that particular position? Secondly, with regard to the issue of JP Hlophe, which you alluded to, the last time I checked, I think JP Musi served in that Judicial Conduct Tribunal and was forced to recuse himself. I think there was an application that was brought, and ultimately he decided to recuse himself. Have you appointed his replacement?
Now, transparency is good, but it's not absolute. I mean, we don't know how you people in the SABC decide which story to cover and which one to exclude. However important we may think that something is, we don't know what informs your decision to go and cover certain events and exclude others. And maybe it's about time that we also have access to your deliberations in relation to why you report the way you tend to report. Because a good program can be there which can advance the cause of the nation. And something that is even mocking will be singled out depending on who is supposed to be the subject matter of the mockery. So, if you want transparency in the deliberations, I suppose you want transparency in the deliberations of cabinet as well, so that it is known, and the ANC and EC, because it's the ruling party. You want transparency everywhere. I would say, let it be put in the public platform, so that we know everybody who is supposed to serve the public, everybody whose actions and decisions impact on the well-being of the nation one way or the other, what informs the decisions that they take. We will even get to know what informs some of the questions that tend to be asked. What caucusing happened before you could ask those particular questions? What is sought to be achieved? So let's be transparent everywhere. It can't just be for the JSC. We all need to be credible before the eyes of the public. JP Musi is here, he will answer for himself. But as far as I know, he was not forced. My understanding without having engaged with him was that as the process was unfolding, he said, I don't agree with what is being said about me, but in order not to delay the process unduly, I will step down. And Justice Makoka has, Justice Makoka. I confuse Makoka and Makoba from time to time because the names are not too far apart. Have since been appointed to take that responsibility. JP, I don't know if you want to touch on that. Have I covered you properly? Thank you so much.
My last question is regarding the CCJA, the continental body. What responsibilities does that actually impose on our constitutional court and the judicial, your office here? Also remembering the criticism on your travels as well in terms of, does that demand more of your time? And yeah, if you can just give us a picture of also what's happening with the continental judiciary.
I think it was on the 10th of May, wasn't it? When, was it June? The 10th of June, I stepped down as president of the CCJA because it's for 2 years. And colleagues were saying I must stay on. I said, no. That's the problem with Africa. Our statute says 1 term of 2 years. I will never buy into the notion that you've done such a good job, therefore stay on. There are other colleagues who can do an even better job. So I stepped down. My colleague, the president of the Constitutional Court of Angola, is the new president. I am, in terms of practice, one of the vice presidents, because if you were president, when you step down for another 2 years, you become vice president, which is very good, because I offered him all the support that he needs to make sure that the organization becomes an even greater success. My responsibilities entail ensuring that there is a proper understanding of the role of that structure, and it was as a result of that push that an unprecedented number of jurisdictions joined during my presidency, because I moved around, I invited, I spoke to people. 2, it also entails providing leadership that extends to ensuring that whenever there is a conference that brings together a number of jurisdictions in the continent, the president is there to provide guidance, to provide leadership, and to provide support. And 2, it also entailed occupying my seat in the world body, representing Africa, with the result that whenever there was a world event that brought together the justices of the Constitutional Court or the justices of the world, I was required to be there, to either present a paper or represent the continent in one way or the other. That is why, was it last year, as I was occupying this position, I was at some stage also the president of the world body. And when these bodies have meetings, including the World Conference of Constitutional Justice, I don't look behind. I'm not one of those that can easily be pressurized into doing or not doing what they are supposed to do. No, I'm very clear. I take advice, but I'm not going to be guided by people who seem to think they have what it takes to insist that I go in a direction that I don't accept as being correct. I don't. So I went all out. That's why I indicated I will do it again, as long as my responsibilities demand that I do it. So I went about addressing even the meeting of the G20 leaders in Argentina, all sorts of meetings. Those informed my travels. That is why I challenged, by the way, when that highly researched thing that allegedly included judges and practitioners was produced. I challenged everybody to demonstrate which trip they believe was wasteful, which of the trips they believe was not justifiable, and they will never be able to do so. So I also, in addition to that responsibility, as the face of the judiciary in this country, I owe it to this country to represent the judiciary in the continent and globally. That happens with the other arms of the state. Parliament from time to time sends its leaders to go and represent it. The executive from time to time go out to represent the executive. I don't know what is so questionable about the judiciary reciprocating, particularly when we have the responsibilities that have mounted as much as they have. I mean, I had some seeking to compare me to my predecessors. None of them ever had the magnitude of the responsibilities that I've had to shoulder. But over and above that, just as the Chief Justice of this country, and then that was that added responsibility of the presidency of the CCJA, continents would from time to time invite me and say, look, we've seen something in you and your people. Come and guide us. The body of new democracies in Armenia did a similar thing, and I was humbled by what they had to say about the role we play as the South African judiciary and the role I play as an individual, especially when they articulated it to the head of the country while I was there. So we've been doing a lot of good work, and that explains the travels that we have undertaken. None of them was wasteful. And I round it up by saying, every time members of the judiciary travel, or almost, well, no, not every time, that's an exaggeration. From time to time, when members of the judiciary travel, there's a query. Why don't you ever investigate the travels of other people? How much a single trip costs? We embarked on a trip some time back. I think J.P. Mlambo was part of it. Judge President Leo was part of it. To find out how other people are going about bettering court performance. We went to, and I think about 4 or 5 countries. We spent about 4-point-something million. It was in the newspapers. Wasteful expenditure. Other people just to get the plane, it's over 5 million. What's wrong? So we will always resist any attempt to juniorize the judiciary as an arm of the state. We will never shy away from confronting any criticism that seeks to reduce us to the level of a unit within the Department of Justice and Correctional Services. Advanced, or let me rather say, comparable and progressive judiciaries are doing much more than we do. And we will never allow anybody to prescribe to this judiciary how junior it must be. We want more, we want recognition as a true arm of the state.
All right. Chief Justice, I just want to ask a question that's kind of an aside, but I'll ask it here. No one just lands where you are. Once you were a boy, and the boy had a dream. I just want to ask, what was your main inspiration that made you decide, I'm going to be a judicial officer one day? Before you were that, what was that inspiration? Because I want to connect that to how you run the Constitutional Court now and the kind of decisions you make. Those things are usually connected. Thanks.
You know, I tell people that I actually wanted to be a medical doctor. I was just thrilled by the very possibility of a person from the village, the son of unskilled laborers, wearing a white coat and having the stethoscopes around them and opening a door for people now to be treated by me. What happened was we had programs at the time when I was at high school in particular, career guidance programs. They came, asked us to fill questionnaires, brought feedback, and said, you must either be a diplomat or a lawyer. People are laughing because they think I'm not diplomatic, but I am highly diplomatic. And two, I skipped an earlier stage, which was when, in 1976, before the uprising, the secondary school that I attended, where Justice Ngabinde comes from, had a trip to Orlando High. And I had been excluded from the debating team on the 11th minute because the one who had been included was not there. They said, Mogoeng, come, and I said, I don't even know the topic. They said, we know you'll do it. I don't know why they excluded me in the first place. So I got involved, something I did not prepare for, debated, and then the lady from Orlando High got position 1, I got position 2. And the principal of Orlando High said, just do more reading. I see a lawyer in you. What also ingrained this thing in me, I keep on saying, was the experience of my grandfather, who was arrested with me in the bushes by the police just because he didn't have his ID book. I saw an injustice in that. The way I was dismissed from high school for just asking that we must observe June 16, and called all sorts of names by the homeland government of the time. So all these things inspired me to realize that there's a greater need in the area of justice. I wasn't thinking about becoming a judge. I was thinking about just becoming a lawyer. Becoming a judge was just a natural consequence of being an advocate. So I'm driven by the injustices that are all around. I'm driven by the abuse of position, the abuse of opportunity, because most of us occupy positions that could benefit society, but we pursue agendas with them. We target people with the opportunities that we have to contribute towards building our nation. So I realized, small as I am, if only I can focus on making a difference where it matters the most, I'll sleep well. Somebody asked me the other day, interviewing me, what legacy do you want to leave behind? I said, no. I don't want legacy. Because if you are pursuing a legacy, you are going to make sure that even government resources are channeled in such a way as to enrich, as to beautify your legacy. So how do you want to be remembered? I said, I don't want to be remembered. It's a privilege, it's an honor to be able to dispense justice to my people with a clear conscience that I don't belong to any group. I just belong to a system that wants to administer justice to people in line with our oath of office, without fear, favor, or prejudice. So that's where I am, my brother. I hope I have given some answer.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Last question from me. I think it will be remiss of me if I don't use this opportunity to get your views and those of President Maya with regard to this issue. There's been a growing trend in the country where litigants who are unhappy about the outcome of their cases in the High Court will simply seek a direct access to the Constitutional Court without going to Bloemfontein. Don't you think that, is likely to render the Supreme Court of Appeal redundant? And secondly, don't you think that perhaps it was a mistake in retrospect? Don't you think it was a mistake to broaden the jurisdiction of the Constitutional Court and say that this court will hear constitutional matters as well as any matter which raises an arguable point of law of general importance which ought to be heard by this court? It seems to me that many people use that provision to come straight here instead of appealing to the Constitutional Court. I'll appreciate if I can hear your views as well as those of President Maya. Thank you.
I think I'll ask the President to speak.
May I please ask you to speak, CJ?
Okay, all right. You see, you've just seen the statistics. The Supreme Court of Appeal does more matters than the Constitutional Court. And we've got to ask the question, when did this amendment that broadened the jurisdiction of the Constitutional Court come into operation? It was 2013, wasn't it? So it's been a good 6 years plus since this legislation came into operation. It has had the predictable effect of increasing our workload. But remember, people have always been coming directly to the Constitutional because the provision that allows that to happen has always been there. The only difference now is that we have decided as a nation to be in the same position as the UK Supreme Court, as the US Supreme Court, and a number of other comparable jurisdictions. Why? Because you can't have a situation where the Constitutional Court is the apex court, and yet there are matters over which it doesn't have jurisdiction. We have chosen a path that is different from Germany, for instance, a path that is different from the Francophone jurisdictions, where, and Russia, by the way, where the Constitutional Court is one side, and then you have the mainstream court system under the leadership of the Supreme Court. We've decided to blend the two and have the Constitutional Court as the highest court in the land, and there is no way in which you can be the highest court in the land and not entertain all other matters that the courts under you are entertaining. So I think it is fine. It's just a question of refining the system, and it's just a question of more capacities being injected into the court, like the senior researchers that I alluded to. Get some very experienced advocates, attorneys to come and guide the teams that work with the judges. I think that way we'll be able to cope. Thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate it. We don't make light of it. You could have decided to stay away. It's a great honor and privilege to interact with you. Thank you. If we have offended you, I apologize. The president.
I'm leaving my phone.
Hey, my sister.